Alright guys, in today's video we're going to have a discussion that may very well turn into a rant. I'm going to do my best not to do that though. But I want to once again discuss the most recent interview that Jim Ryan did. He is the current PlayStation CEO. He did an interview with GamesIndustry.biz, and I did make two videos going over this, and I thought I made myself pretty clear, and I know that a lot of you understand exactly what I'm going to say and what we're going to go over, but I'm going to try my best to simplify it even further. I'm not going to read the interview. I'm not even going to read quotes from the interview, because the truth is that there's a lot of stuff he's saying in this interview that if you do go check it out for yourself, I will have it linked down below. You can read it and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a lot of stuff he says where you have to read between the lines and really understand what he's trying to say about Sony's current position and stance going into the future with the PlayStation 5 and next generation. And again, I'm going to try my best to just simplify things and have some bigger picture thinking right here and paint the picture for you as best I can, because some people just still don't seem to understand what's going on and how things are going to play out within the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that I know exactly what's going to go down over the next 3 to 5 years, because I don't know. But I think I have a good idea, and I think that what we can see now, the information we have access to right now, what we're hearing right now, and also looking at just how things have been going down over the past 4 to 5 years, I think if you look at these things and put certain things together, put two and two together, you can kind of understand what's going on here. And so the first thing we're going to discuss and talk about has to do with PlayStation exclusives. What's going to happen with PlayStation exclusives going into next generation? Well, it depends on who you ask. There will be people who tell you that no matter what, Sony will never, ever relinquish PlayStation exclusives and release them from being attached to the console that they want to sell, to put them on PC, or to, even worse, put them on PlayStation Now day and date. There will be others, however, who tell you no, that is exactly the direction Sony's going in, and over the next couple of years, it's just a matter of a couple years until they end up doing that. Now, I'm here to tell you that if you read this interview with Jim Ryan, he's saying two things. Okay, now really pay attention to this part, because this is as simple as I can make it. The first thing he says is that PlayStation, as of right now, is in a good position, and he wants PlayStation 5 to be in just as good of a position as the PlayStation 4 is, if not an even better one. He says that the formula that Sony currently has, the business model that Sony currently has, is working, and it's working well for them. He cites things such as God of War and Spider-Man and these big game launches they have. And he also says that the only time they're going to change this up is if they are either A, forced to do so, or B, heavily incentivized to do so. Now, we are going to go into these two things. What would force Sony to change this current business model, this current formula they have that is clearly working so well for them and is most likely going to continue to work well for them going into next generation? And even more interestingly, what would incentivize them to change this up, right? To stray from the current model that has made them the leader within this market by a pretty significant margin. We are going to go over that. The first thing here, talking about what would force them to do so, what would force Sony. Listen, there's only one thing that would force Sony to change their business model, to stray from what has worked for them. You ever hear saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Yeah, that applies here. The only thing that would cause them to be forced to do this is if suddenly their model, their current business model, wasn't making them money. If it just started a downward trend. If going into 2020, 2021, and 2022, there was just a decline year over year over year, because you have to have the basic understanding that the only thing these companies care about is profitability. But even more so than that, sustainable profitability, year over year growth, or at least growth that shows enough potential that even if they have to wait it out a year or two or a couple years, it will pay off in the long run. Okay? That's what you have to understand. Currently, Sony is enjoying the most profit, the most revenue from the PlayStation division that they've ever experienced. I believe in 2018, I'm sure it will be slightly down in 2019, which is understandable because it's the last year before we move on to next gen. That's normal. That's why I'm not going to knock Microsoft's numbers too badly either, because things are just down for both companies, and that's normal going into the transitioning into a next generation. But think about this. In 2018, Sony made more money in 2018 with the PlayStation division, just the PlayStation division, in that single year than they made throughout the entirety of the PlayStation 2 generation. I want you to really think about that. They made more money off of PlayStation in 2018, 1 year, than they did throughout the entirety of the PlayStation 2 generation. And do you know what drove this? Exclusive games did, selling tons of hardware, okay? Games like God of War, games like Spider-Man. This is why Jim Ryan was key to cite those games and mention those games and point out that those games, yeah, they are special because not only do they sell a crap ton of hardware units for us, but they make us a bunch of money too. Now, some people are going to say, MBG, why are you so focused on the money that these companies are making? Listen, I'm not so much focused on the money as much as I'm focused on understanding how things are going to go down, or at least trying to be ready or prepared for how things are going to go down, because when you pay attention to this stuff, you start to realize that these things go hand in hand. You want high-quality single-player games? Well, you have to pay attention to the financial side of gaming. If you're not, then you're going to have trouble on figuring out why some companies are not doing single-player games and why some companies are, why some companies just seem so dense for not doing them, and a bunch of other things as well, right? But that's the only thing that would force them, is if they suddenly just started losing profit year over year and their model just wasn't making them money anymore. If they were putting too much money into games and not getting enough back. Although I will say a lot of their games this generation, especially the massive ones like God of War and Spider-Man, have proven that you can put a bunch of money into AAA games and get even more back, and it has a really great payoff. You just have to have that confidence. You have to have the confidence in the developers that if you're going to give them with that money, you're going to trust them with that money, that they can deliver on it and make something that will truly end up making it more profitable, right? It's not just about breaking even, it's about how much more can you make after breaking even. That's what's important here. And so as far as you can see, Sony, they're not anywhere in the red. They're showing nothing but continued growth with the formula that they've established in the market that they are currently dominating in. I thought I made this pretty clear, but some people still don't understand it. Now, again, that will only change if things start going into the red, and year over year over year, over the next 3 to 5 years, they just start losing money and bleeding money, and it just won't stop. Does anybody really expect that to happen anytime soon? All signs are pointing that no, it's not going to happen. I mean, it's a possibility. I'm not saying for sure it won't happen, but it doesn't seem likely at all. Now, moving on to the second thing here, what would incentivize Sony to start looking at other business models, or maybe even looking at Xbox's business model and saying we should start doing that? Well, the only thing that would really incentivize them to really do that is if Microsoft proves over the next couple of years that their model is essentially superior and more profitable than Sony's current model. If over the next couple of years, starting with Project Scarlet or the next generation and Project xCloud and, them continuing to push Game Pass really, really hard, if over the next couple of years they start to surpass Sony in the amount of revenue they make and the amount of profit they make, and it's all driven by subscription numbers, by something like Game Pass, by xCloud and whatnot, then you could see Sony maybe not necessarily uprooting and abandoning their current model, but definitely paying a lot closer attention and even maybe starting to do the same thing so that way they can get a piece of that pie. All Sony is currently doing right now, and I think that it's just so clear. I don't know why people think it's not clear. Like, they think because Sony puts God of War, Uncharted, and Infamous onto PlayStation Now for 3 months, and then they take it off, they think that that's suddenly Sony showing that they're completely changing their formula. No, you have to understand that they have shareholders that they have to answer to. And a lot of these shareholders are basically like looking at companies like Microsoft and even Google with Stadia. This is why Jim Ryan in the interview mentions Google, because a lot of people are like saying like, oh, Sony, shouldn't you be scared? Look at Google. They're entering the game. And Sony's just like, No, we're not. Something else Jim Ryan talks about in this article that I feel like some people missed out on or weren't paying attention to is he talks about how, to paraphrase about what he said, how hard Sony has worked to carve out this market and how they have this rich history and they basically worked for it. They earned the market that they currently dominate. It didn't just fall into their lap, and they didn't do it the easy way. They had to work for it. They had to, and all you had to do is look at each generation of PlayStation and where they succeed. I mean, think of this. I think like 4 of the 5 top 5 consoles, home consoles, not handhelds, but home consoles, are PlayStations. If I'm not mistaken. I think that number maybe is a little bit messed up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But I know at the very least that Sony has never had a situation where they sold less than 80 million consoles. And that's just so impressive. And I think what people fail to understand is that you have to look at the reasoning as to why Sony would, change their current business model. Okay, why would they risk messing up a formula that has been working for them? Just because they're preparing for something that could happen doesn't mean they're banking on it happening, right? Like what they're doing with PlayStation Now, them trying to get more subscribers, them trying to flesh out PlayStation Now, and Jim Ryan talking about it and talking about how, yeah, it is a possibility in the future that they may have to change and adapt. What do you want the guy to say? Do you want the guy to say that, if over, the next 5 years, if cloud streaming does take off and Microsoft and Google are dominating and other companies as well, we're not going to be able to compete? You think that's what he's going to say to his shareholders or to Sony shareholders? Absolutely not. They're just covering all their bases. I've been trying to explain this, and there's a lot of people who are very heavily invested in the Xbox, and they want to push this so hard to the point where it's like, you either accept it or you're wrong. And let me tell you, that's wrong. Because I'm not the one sitting here, and I don't think there's many other rational people sitting here saying that I know for sure, and I can tell you positively that over the next 10 years, that there will always be exclusive games that are just exclusive to one box and one console. Because I don't know that. I do not know the future. However, what I do know is that there's a reason why this formula works. There's a reason why me and many other gamers do not like Microsoft's formula. Sure, you can brag about Gears 5, which, okay, it was high quality, and it was in Game Pass, and The Outer Worlds. But 2 things here. Gears 5 was never going to deviate from being a AAA game. There would be too much backlash if that ever happened. Okay? Second, The Outer Worlds, I'm very happy for Microsoft in that game, but we also have to understand that that game was in development without the intention of it being on Game Pass day one before Microsoft acquired Obsidian. So the bulk of what that game was made during a time when it was sink or swim. There was no safety net. They were an independent company, and they knew that they had to deliver something really good. Now, I'm not taking anything away from anybody here, because I think what Obsidian did with The Outer Worlds, based off of what I've seen and heard, is fantastic. But we also have to understand that, this is a very nuanced situation, okay? It's not just suddenly The Outer Worlds is a near AAA game on Game Pass, so that's what every game's going to be like going forward, and that means every game's going to be the same quality level. We don't know that. Microsoft has a lot to prove, and that's the point here. They have to prove that their model is ultimately going to be the more successful model, the more profitable model. Okay, this is where the battle is. Sony's sticking to what they know. They're sticking to their guns, and they're saying, look, we've been in this market for this many years. We've been doing it for this long. We know what we're doing. We know how to dominate the market. We are aware that the market does change, and we will have to adapt. But until the day comes where I would say the heart of their model, the backbone of what their model is based around, until the day comes where that no longer is profitable or sustainable, then they will change. And if you want to know what the heart and the backbone of their model is, quality AAA games. That is what the backbone of their model is right now, and that's what it's going to be going into the PlayStation 5. And if anybody has this belief in their head that that's suddenly not going to be profitable or lucrative going into next generation, all I have to say is look at how Sony did it this entire generation. Look at their sustainable growth. Look at how well they're doing and continuing to do. So that's all I had to say, guys. Apologies for the video being so long, but I had to take some time to talk about this. I apologize if you hear some noise in the background. There are some landscapers next door. Hopefully it's not coming through too much, but let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. I will be interested to see what you guys have to say. Leave the video a like if you enjoyed it, found it informative, or agree with what I have to say here. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon so you never miss an upload, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.